Are you wondering if it's time to start introducing foods to your baby, but not sure what kind of foods you want to introduce and maybe what foods you want to avoid? In today's episode, we're going to talk just about those two things.
Welcome to the Beehive Doc Talks with Dr. Blair Rolnick. As a pediatrician and mother herself, Dr. Rolnick is here to answer your most pressing parenting questions and guide you through the tough spots.
Good morning and welcome back to Be Kind Pediatrics. For those of you who are new to the show, my name is Dr. Rolnick. I'm a board-certified pediatrician and a mom. And what we've got going on in the background here, I'm really super excited. We have a local artist doing a mural in my office, so it's in progress. Hopefully the next time I'm up on here, you guys can see the completed work. Today, we're going to talk about introduction of solids and specifically what foods I recommend my patients start off with and which foods I recommend that you avoid. A nice little preface to this video would be the video I did on when to introduce salads. So today I'm going to focus on those really early eaters between 6 to 9 months who are really just learning the skills of how to eat. So during this time frame, parents, I always tell them to focus on teaching your child the skill of eating and learning different textures and tastes. Children at this age, all of their, or the majority of their nutrition really should still be coming from either breast milk or formula. So they're not feeding for nutrition per se, they're really eating to learn the skill. But it is still really important that they start to learn the skill early on. So you don't want to start introducing solids at 12 months when your child's nutrition really should be transitioning to solid food as their main source of nutrition. You want to start teaching them how to eat a little bit earlier than that. So the first thing I talk to parents about is how to prepare foods for babies based on their age. I really, really like the Solid Starts app for this reason. It shows parents how to prepare foods based on their baby's age by the food. So for example, if you wanted to prepare bananas for your baby, for your 4-month-old, that would probably be something like a mashed banana on a preloaded spoon that you're feeding to the baby. For a 6 to 9-month-old baby, they can actually start doing some baby-led weaning or finger foods. So for the majority of those foods, again, you want really easily mashable foods that are cut up and presented to the baby in the size and shape of an adult pinky finger. And then as they progress on and they're learning of how to eat, the shapes of those foods might and can change. So a 12-month-old or an 18-month-old baby might be able to eat a banana in a bigger piece or presented in a different way than a 6-month-old baby, for example. So let's dive in on foods that I think are a great choice to start off with. First off, I want to say that there's no cut way that you have to introduce solid foods. There used to be a belief that introducing fruits before vegetables made babies not want to eat vegetables as much, but there's really no evidence to support that. So really you can introduce foods in any way that you want or that works for your family and your baby. But I just recommend that you consistently give them a food a couple times before you say this isn't a food that your baby likes. It takes quite some time for children to get used to new flavors, textures, and sensations. So you have to introduce a food about 7 to 9 times before they really get used to it. Secondly, we used to tell parents that they should do the same food for 3 or 5 days and then add a new ingredient. Again, there's really no evidence at all behind that. I just recommend that when you're introducing the high allergen foods, so those are things like dairy, eggs, tree nuts, etc., that you introduce that food by itself that day so that if there's no reaction, you know what food it was to. However, if you didn't do this and there was a reaction, you could go back and work with your doctor to figure out and narrow down which food your baby had a reaction to. So a really good food to start off with is avocados. And I really like this food because they're easily mashable. They have high fats, which are really important for the developing brain. And most babies find them tasty and delicious. So an avocado is a great choice for a first food because it's unlikely to be an allergenic food. It has a ton of great nutrition, tons of micronutrients, high fats, and really easily mashable for your baby. If your baby is in that early learning category, like that 6 to 9-month-old baby, you can prepare the avocado lengthwise and little cuts about the size of your adult finger. Pro tip here, avocados are super slippery. So you can actually wrap that avocado in something to give it a better grasp. Some parents like to use like chia seeds or breadcrumbs or something that has an additional nutritional value to make it a little bit stickier for your baby. A second food that I really like parents to introduce to their babies early on is actually flaky whole fish. So you want to use a fish that doesn't have any bones because those are a choking hazard. But fish are really high in DHA. They're a great source of omega-3s. And they can be a little bit of an acquired taste. So starting that introduction early can help your child get used to and enjoy the sensation and taste of fish. Salmon is a great choice for first fish because it's easily mashable and flaky. If you have the opportunity, you want to go for a wild caught salmon because they tend to be lower in mercury and heavy metals. And you can even prepare it with a little bit of olive oil or some spices like rosemary or thyme. Don't be afraid to let your baby have some different herbs and spices. It's really important for them, again, to find that food is tasty and delicious and enjoy the experience. And there's really no harm to spicing up your child's food. The only thing that I do recommend is that you don't heavily salt their food. Their kidneys are still developing, and so they can't handle really high sodium loads. So lightly salted, a little bit of olive oil, some herbs of your choice are a great addition to a fish for a learning eater. The third food I really like, if your family eats meats, is a meat. Chicken is a really easy one to start off with. And again, I recommend here that you use the fattier pieces of the chicken. And the reason for that is because those fats melt and they make it a little bit easier and safer for your baby to chew and digest and swallow. And also they need those full fats for their developing brain. So, either the thigh or the wing are a great choice. You can take little pieces of chicken if they're in that 6 to 9 month old range, shredded, again, the size of your pinky. I even really recommend putting them in a little bit of bone broth, again, for flavor, but also because that broth helps to lubricate the meat and make it easier to swallow. And additionally, bone broth has a lot of great nutrients to offer your baby, tons of great amino acids and immune support. So a little bit of shredded meat and some bone broth is a great option for some first foods for your learning eater. Another great early food choice for your baby are steamed vegetables. So you want them really, really well cooked so that they're easily mashable in your baby's mouth. But if your baby's in that 6 to 9 month mark, you can give them like a steamed broccoli fillet is a great choice, and they can pick it up and kind of mash on it. You can put a little lemon, olive oil, and salt on there to give it some flavor and let them enjoy the food. Bananas are also a classic choice for early introduction, early learners. It's easily mashable. It has tons of great micronutrients. For those younger babies, you're going to mash it and spoon feed it to them. For those 6 to 9 month old babies, you're going to serve it lengthwise and, again, in the shape of an adult pinky finger. And you can also wrap that in something that's a little bit breadcrumby to give it a little bit of texture, but also make it easier for your baby to grab. Another good option are full fat yogurts. So again, when you're feeding your baby, you want to focus on foods that have full fats. They need those fats for their developing brain. So high fat, full fat yogurts with natural flavoring without any really artificial sweeteners are a great choice. I do recommend that you avoid artificial sweeteners and artificial dyes for your newborns. Try to go with a more minimally processed option like a whole fat, full fat yogurt. So another great food option for early introduction food to your baby is actually hummus. So you want to make sure the consistency is a little bit more fluid. You can add a little bit of extra tahini to that if you want to make it less sticky, and a little bit of warm water and lemon or olive oil. So lemon is a great source of vitamin C. Tahini is a great source of calcium, actually, especially for those families who are vegan or cow's milk free. And the beans have a ton of great protein. So that's another great food for early introduction to your baby. On top of the vegetables I talked about earlier, steamed or cooked bell peppers are a great option because they have a lot of vitamin C, and they're a nice alternative to some of the more sugary sources of vitamin C. All those different color bell peppers are great and they're very flavorful. And then lastly, but actually potentially one of the more important sources of nutrition for a baby as they get older, but is a good early introduction food, are eggs. So eggs are one of those high-risk allergy foods. I do recommend the first time you give your baby eggs that it's just eggs in the meal. But eggs are a great source of choline, which is a really important micronutrient for the developing brain. And they're also a great source of protein. So you can do either eggs scrambled, you can do a little omelet cut lengthwise, again, into the size of your pinky finger for those 6 to 9 month olds. For the younger feeders, you can bake them into a muffin, for example, and mush it up with either breast milk or cow's milk or a full fat milk alternative and feed it to them that way. So now let's talk about a few foods that I usually recommend parents avoid for their newborns. So the first on that list is traditionally always going to be honey. And that's because newborns are susceptible to something called botulism toxin, which they are not susceptible after the age of 1. So babies less than 1 should really avoid honey. But after 1, it's a great nutritional add to their diet. 2, I really recommend that parents try to avoid or minimize the consumption of rice-based food products for babies. We know that rice and foods in general that sit in the ground absorb a lot of the heavy metal contamination of our soil. And rice is one of the most highly contaminated foods, highly contaminated again in arsenic. I wrote a lovely article on all of this that you can check out on my website. But rice is also a food, while being heavily contaminated, it actually doesn't add a lot of nutritional value to your baby's diet. And since it doesn't have a big nutritional add and it potentially has some harm there, I say just skip it. Sub in something like whole grain oatmeal. You can grind that up and puree it and feed it to your baby, or when they're old enough, you can give it to them soaked in full fat milk. Another food that I tell parents to try to avoid are hot dogs. So hot dogs are a huge choking hazard because they're easily picked up by babies and young infants, but they aren't easily broken up in their mouth. They're also highly processed and contain a ton of nitrites, so they're not a great nutritional add. And so I would avoid hot dogs for your early learner. And then kind of as a broad category, I would recommend that you avoid, again, very processed foods or foods that are very high in artificial sweeteners or dyes. Try to aim for foods that are more whole foods like fruits and vegetables, that it can be mashed or steamed or cooked, and adding your own seasoning, like, minimal amounts of salt, olive oil. Again, we talked about maybe some herbs like, cilantro, basil, thyme, rosemary, etc. Cinnamon, any real spice, just to get your baby interested in those different flavors. There's a category of foods I want to talk about that I don't think that you need to avoid, but you should be careful with. So those are the choking hazard foods. Those are going to be small vegetables and fruits that are round shaped. They can easily get caught in your baby's esophagus, their eating tube, or their trachea, which is their breathing tube. And so those are going to be things like blueberries, grapes, cherry, tomatoes. You can absolutely feed them to your baby, but you want to prepare them appropriately. So for those young babies, those early learners, you want to mash them up so that they're soft, and you can give your baby an early self-feeding spoon that's preloaded, let them bring it to their mouth. For those older babies, you want to quarter them all the way up to the age of 3, really. So you can take a grape or a blueberry and cut it up into quarters for them when they're old enough. Nut butters are another one that can be a choking hazard, so they can glob up and block your child's airway or feeding tube. And so you can absolutely feed your child nut seeds and nut butters, but you actually want to add something to those seeds and butters to make them a little bit more fluid and less sticky. So you can add your favorite milk or your milk alternative to them and dilute them down. You can add breast milk to them and dilute them down and just get them a little bit less sticky. So we talked about some foods to avoid: rice, honey under the age of 1, and potentially some of the choking hazards and how to properly prepare them. It's not an exhaustive list of choking hazards. If you have any questions or concerns, or you're concerned about introducing a particular food to your baby, you can always reach out to your pediatrician for further guidance about that. Then I briefly want to go on talk about some how-tos and how to do this safely. So when you're first introducing foods to your baby, again, they ideally should be somewhere between 4 and 6 months. You want to have checked in with your pediatrician ahead of time just to make sure that they have met the developmental milestones where it's safe and appropriate to introduce foods. You want to have them in a chair with good posture so that their back is supported and that their feet are touching either a stool or something to support their feet, so that they're not working on their balance while also trying to learn the skill of feeding and eating. It's a pretty messy business, so I recommend that you get actually not a bib, but they have really nice like t-shirts that are like t-shirt bibs. And I recommend those for 2 reasons. One, the bib can kind of be a distraction for some babies, so they spend all their time trying to rip off and get off the bib instead of focusing on learning how to eat. And 2, it gives them a little bit more protection for their clothes. So one of those nice little bib t-shirts works really nicely. I mean, you don't have to have anything underneath it, just put the t-shirt on. Alternatively, you can just feed them without a shirt on or just in their diaper. It might be a messy but it'll, and fun affair, but learning is to eat is kind of a sensory introduction. So, just in their diaper is also a great option. Ideally, when they're first learning to eat, you want to do this when they're not really hungry. So they should get a bottle or breastfeeding session, 10 or 15 minutes before their first foods. And I wouldn't expect them to eat huge amounts. So, maybe 3 of those little finger-sized adult finger-sized food options, but I wouldn't expect that they eat all of it necessarily. Again, at this age, they're really just working on learning how to feed and how to eat, and not necessarily using food as a source, as a major source of their nutrition. Still, the bulk of their nutrition should be coming from breast milk or formula. And lastly, I want to mention that I tell parents to watch 2 videos before they start feeding their children. So 1, go ahead and watch some YouTube videos on the difference between gagging and choking. Gagging can be a part of learning how to eat. And usually when a child is gagging, they are making noise and they are not panicking. If you think your child is choking or gagging, you want to actually stay calm, because if you make a noise like, sometimes what happens is your baby takes a big in, and if they are actually choking, whatever is in their airway just gets sucked deeper in. So try to remain calm. Remember that choking is usually silent and the child usually looks distressed or panicked. I do recommend that all parents at the beginning of having their baby take an infant CPR class. And so that you should remain calm and immediately start those back thrusts. If you can see the food visible and easily grabbable, you can go ahead and grab it out of their mouth. But I don't recommend that you do the blind swoop through their mouth, because you can actually inadvertently push whatever object is blocking their airway to get further back. So try to take some look at some of those. There's great YouTube videos if you haven't taken an infant CPR class. There's great videos on how to do appropriate back thrusts. Even better to sign up for an in-person class. And again, try to get yourself to, if it's your first baby and the first time you're feeding a baby, watch some videos on the difference between gagging and choking. But a big one, again, is that choking is silent and the child usually looks distressed. So I hope you found today's video empowering and useful. I think it's great to watch something like this and have a little bit of a plan before you start feeding your baby for the first time. And if you have any questions or concerns, as always, please leave a below.
Thank you for watching The Beehive Doc Talks with Dr. Blair Rolnick. For more episodes and her practice, visit BeKindPediatrics.com, and don't forget to subscribe for more parenting tips wherever you get your podcasts. This information is for educational purposes only. It is not medical advice. Always seek medical advice from a qualified physician.